Welcome back to another beautiful day in the land of music. My name is Douglas, and in today's video, I want to talk about the 5 reasons that the Roland V-Stage takes the cake in comparison with these two amazing stage keyboards, the Roland V-Stage and the Nord Stage 4. Now, having developed training courses for both of these keyboards, I'm pretty intimately familiar with the overall flow from start to finish. If you're curious on the Nord Stage 4 or the Roland V-Stage training courses, hours of content where I walk you step by step through start to finish of how to use all the essential functionality of these keyboards. Check those out at my website, DSoundman.com. I'll throw a link below as well. Hugely beneficial, especially with the V-Stage where the menu and the reference manual are a little clunky to find what you want to find in terms of how to use something. I give a lot of practical examples and exercises of building sounds using the functionality that's kind of buried in the menus and deep in the V-Stage. So check those out, but that's given me a lot of insight into how these boards work. I've played live for years, and as I've used both these boards, there's been certain features that have stood out in each one of them as, oh, I like that, compared to, let's say, the Nord Stage 4 or vice versa. So in this video, I want to highlight 5 of those that the Roland V-Stage either has or does better, in my opinion, than the Nord Stage 4. So jumping right in with number 1, the Roland V-Stage in terms of connectivity has some benefits or some pros compared to the Nord Stage 4. Mostly in the terms of the outputs that we have on the Roland V-Stage. So we have the 2 balanced TRS outputs. We also have 2 balanced XLR outputs. What this means is when I'm playing on stage, I don't need to bring a DI box or 2 DI boxes to go into the snake on stage. I can go XLR out of the Roland V-Stage right into the snake. Now, this doesn't apply to our sub outs or our alternate outs. Those are just TRS. But when it comes to the main outputs, I'm able to send those out via XLR, then I can go straight into the snake without needing a DI box. When we talk about device inputs from a connectivity standpoint, Roland V-Stage has 3 device inputs that we can really customize to any way we want to use it. On the Nord Stage 4, we do have different pedal inputs, but they're a bit more dedicated. So one is for a volume style expression pedal, one is for momentary switches, so it's not as much a mix and match scenario as it is with the Roland V-Stage. And then we're going to talk about the audio interface because that's a big obvious advantage that the Roland V-Stage has. But along with that, we get a microphone XLR input, as well as left and right 1/4-inch inputs that we could plug line instruments into or another keyboard into, and then route those through the audio interface or route them out of our outputs on the V-Stage. So Nord Stage 4 doesn't have a microphone input or even left and right 1/4-inch inputs. It only has a little 1/8-inch stereo monitor in, which you can't do a whole lot with it, so I don't find a huge benefit in that. Roland V-Stage, on the other hand, let's talk about a couple of scenarios where you might use the microphone in and the left and right 1/4-inch inputs. So we could pass through the audio of those. We can control the line levels and things like that on those inputs, pass them through our outputs on the V-Stage. So let's say we only have 2 channels available on our snake for keyboards. We've got 2 keyboards. We can run one of them into the Roland V-Stage, and then both of the V-Stage and that second keyboard output from the main outs on the Roland V-Stage. The other way that we can use these is we can pass these through to the audio interface. So if I want to plug a microphone in and record that microphone into my computer, I can use the audio interface that's in the Roland V-Stage and record through that. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the microphone is it's not a condenser. It doesn't have 48-volt phantom power. So it's just a dynamic microphone input, but it still is a microphone input. You can also use that for talkback, and I'll talk about that when we talk about the mic in number 2. So number 1 being connectivity. I think the Roland V-Stage has a leg up when it comes to the inputs and the outputs that it has. So while we're talking about connectivity on the V-Stage, there is an entire audio interface built into this keyboard that the Nord Stage 4 does not have either. So there's no audio interface on the Nord Stage 4, but on the V-Stage, we mentioned this in terms of the microphone and the line inputs, being able to pass those through the audio interface, but we also get 2 channels left and right for the organ, acoustic piano, electric piano, and synthesizer parts, both the A and the B parts, along with the main outputs and the sub outputs. All of those show up as channels within our DAW with the built-in audio interface that the V-Stage has. So huge capability when we're using this live, if we're recording this along with our live performance, or if we're just using this in the studio, having that built-in audio interface allows us to record the audio and the sounds coming out of the V-Stage directly into our computer with separate outputs left and right for all of our parts, as well as the keyboard as a whole, the 2-line inputs separately, and then the microphone input. So number 2 goes along with the XLR input, but that is the mic in talkback feature that we can use on the V-Stage. So over on the right-hand side of the keyboard, we have this section called mic in. We have a level knob and we have an on-off button. So one really good use case for this is plugging a microphone into the V-Stage and being able to talk back. So we route that microphone out the sub out, only to be heard by our band members on stage. And then we can on off that microphone here. There's even some noise reduction functionality in here. So we can have it mute when it's under a certain dB. And then when we're talking, it can release that, open that gate so you can hear. So it doesn't feed in noise from stage, but when we're talking into it, it can self-activate in a sense, or we can just press the on-off button that we have over here on the right of the keyboard. Now this has become more popular. You see bands have a microphone. Whoever's kind of the lead on stage will have a microphone where they can talk to the band. If there's a change up on song or something that they need to communicate with the band instead of walking over and talking into someone's ear, having a microphone plugged in that you can just reach over, turn on, hey guys, we're gonna skip this next song and jump to whatever it is. Or we need to make an adjustment. We're going to, double the length of this next song, then turn it off and we get to playing. So it gives a really good quick feedback loop to the band that's not heard by the general audience. And you can leverage that. I think that's really smart to put that on there. And again, because the Nord Stage 4 doesn't have a microphone input, doesn't have any of that functionality either, as you would assume. So number 3, where the Roland V-Stage has an advantage over the Nord Stage 4 from a stage use are scene chains. So the Nord Stage 3 had song mode. That went away with the Nord Stage 4. And if the Nord Stage 4 had it, they'd kind of be a draw. But the Roland V-Stage has scene chains where we can chain together multiple scenes. And scenes are saved instances similar to a program being a saved instance on the Nord Stage 4. The Roland has scenes. Those are saved instances of everything on the panel here. And we can chain those together into something that allows us to set up our set list for a gig we're playing or for church or wherever we're using the V-Stage. And we can come in here, switch right to the next one. Switch right to the next one. And they're really easy to move around. So I can come into my edit menu and I can copy, cut, paste. I can swap my scenes around within this set list or this scene chain. Makes it really easy to organize. And I have a ton of available scene chains. So if we come into our scene chain list view, we have 16 different banks. And then within each bank, we have 8 scene chains that we can define. So tons of options within each scene chain, then you can have a ton of scenes in there. So the amount of scene chains you can set up is crazy. And it just makes a really quick way to move through scenes. You can also set up momentary pedals to do the scene up and scene down for you. So you don't have to press these 8 buttons under the screen or the increment, decrement buttons or anything like that. You can just use a pedal to switch between these scenes. So again, makes it really nice to lay this out. And the only way you could really do this on the Nord Stage 4 is to use the organize function, which works well to swap and move programs. But you'd have to go to the free space towards the end of the storage or the program memory on the Nord Stage 4. And you'd have to copy in the programs that you want to lay out in a set. And obviously, because it's using program memory, you don't have as much capability there as you do within the scene chain functionality here. Now, number 4, where the Roland V-Stage has an advantage, and this is an interesting one, and it comes down to MIDI. So I've got this little controller right here. This is the M Audio Oxygen Pro Mini. I've done a lot of videos on this in my channel in the past. But what's interesting is we have a USB, we have 2 USB, class-compliant USB ports on the back of the V-Stage. What these allow us to do is power things like keyboard controllers. So if I plug this in, notice, bingo, all my lights turn on. And if I play this, currently the MIDI channel is set to the organ part on the V-Stage. So we're able to power things like a controller just by plugging them into those class compliant USB devices, and it's communicating the MIDI messages over that USB as well. This opens up some possibilities. So if we were to do something similar with the Nord Stage 4, we'd have to go from the MIDI out, which is a little dongle adapter thing on the Oxygen Pro Mini, but some controllers actually have a 5-pin MIDI. You'd have to go into the 5-pin MIDI on the Nord Stage 4. If you have more than one controller you're trying to plug in, you have to use some sort of MIDI splitter to accommodate that because we only have one MIDI in port on the Nord Stage 4. Then you'd have to power that somehow. So you'd have to use a USB cable and a power block and plug that into an outlet to power the controller because you can't power it from the Nord Stage 4. So a really nice add-on that the V-Stage allows us to power two different devices with USB right out of the V-Stage and communicate those MIDI messages if we wanted into the V-Stage to play sounds. So in this way, if you're familiar with the aux KB functionality where we can take a particular sound section on the Nord Stage 4, dedicate it to a MIDI channel that's completely controlled by a controller, we can do the same thing on the V-Stage, whether it's through MIDI or through that USB port on the back, those two USB ports. Really nice that we can power and communicate over a MIDI cable right to the V-Stage. So that's number 4. And number 5 is the assignments functionality. So if we come up to assign here, my 3 pedal inputs. So we have 4 pedal inputs. One of them's a hold pedal. The other 3 are assignable pedals on the V-Stage. So we have the 3 pedals. We have our pitch wheel, our mod wheel. We have the brake and the speed buttons right below the pitch and mod wheel here. All of these can be assigned to a plethora of different things. You'll notice that any control that's assignable is kind of blinking in these fading lights here. And then we're able to come in and assign different things per part across the whole, as well as from a system perspective. So if we wanted to do like scene up, scene down, we could program all of that in. And what's great about this is I can come over to any one of these pieces. So let's say I came over to system, I can press down and I can choose tap tempo, all of those different things. Or let's say I go over to my synth B part. If I move a control, it automatically pops up with the assign edit screen with that control, and I can set a min and a max value. So a ton of customization that we can do within the 3 control pedals we can plug in, the pitch, the mod, and the brake and speed. And when you think about that, that gives us a ton of capability here in terms of taking controls that we would normally use our hands for and moving those to pedals, to our controls, and combining things together and using those to speed up our workflow as we're playing on stage. Now, there is Morph Assign on the Nord Stage 4, and it works a little bit different. So we have the Morph Assign section where we can assign morphing to the wheel, to the aftertouch of the keybed, or to a volume style expression pedal. Now, what's interesting with the Nord Stage 4 is we don't have a menu for the Morph Assign, so we don't have as much visibility to what's being assigned, but we can assign multiple parameters to a single control. So for example, our modulation wheel, we could assign 5 different parameters that all work in different ways with min maxes and things like that to our wheel at one time. Things to keep in mind, there's a bit of more flexibility here, but then the Nord Stage 4 has a little bit of an edge if you wanted to assign multiple things to, let's say, your aftertouch. But at its core, I feel like the Roland V-Stage and the assign functionality is more flexible than the Nord Stage 4 Morph Assign. While it takes a little bit longer to set it up, I'll give it that, it's not drastically more difficult. And so I think having the menu to be able to change those things is pretty cool. So those are 5 things, in my opinion, that the Roland V-Stage either has or does better than the Nord Stage 4 in terms of playing live. There's a lot of features that, in my opinion, are just a draw. It's really personal preference on the sections and some of the features within there, that there's such a similarity between the two that I feel like, it's a draw in a lot of those cases. But those are 5 that stand out to me. Again, if you're curious on my training course for the V-Stage or my training course for the Nord Stage 4, check those out on my website, DSoundman.com. Thanks for watching, stay inspired, and keep making that music.